Which is more appealing as a title for my thesis to be published as pop psychology? You vote. 1. Is reading Brene Brown an act of political, social and cultural resistance to traditional intellectuals? Or 2. I saw his book in a shop one day and almost burnt the shop down? Or 3. I wonder if it's a taboo subject. Chat your preference, but when you hear these participants generated subtitles, I want you to acknowledge in the chat what you like best. In the meantime, I acknowledge our First Nations people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I currently live in Yagara Nations country, Ipswich, but I'm flying today to Nipaluna under Mount Kunani, Hobart, Tasmania, so that's why this is recorded. Put up your hand if you've ever read a book from beginning to end, attended a book club, or discussed it with someone. As a child, did your carer read you a story that changed your life? For me, it was Bambi. Oh, when her mother was shot and killed, I physically felt it. I swear it was the empathy injection that caused me to become a social worker. It was another book that convinced me to do social work, The Power of One by Bryce Courtney. Experiencing a resistance story where one person's actions positively impacted against racism was life-changing. One person can make a difference, and reading one resistance book can change a life. Let me come back to Bambi as a resistant agent at the end, but for now, know that I have chosen to research pop psychology books as creative resistance to the hegemony because many of my clients read and love those books, yet often the helping sectors belittle them. If you're comfortable, drop a yes into the chat box or raise your hand if you have suffered a life-changing experience, divorce, a death, loss of job, exam failure, death of a pet, etc. Something that made you question everything and ultimately change the trajectory of your life. This research is for you. Through book clubs, my research looked at why and how people use Brene Brown's books to learn, grow, recover, and help others. This research helps people who have experienced a life-changing mental well-being challenge, as well as helping mental health professionals and doctors to better meet the recovery needs of clients. My domestic excellence scholarship required research into mental health lived experience. After my literature review and finding the gaps, I decided to combine my professional expertise with my personal practice and refine my research to a popular academic author within pop psychology, organic intellectual, Professor Brene Brown. One of the gaps was to look at the popular literature that people experiencing mental well-being challenges were using. The reason for this is that some professionals, academics and social media users deride pop psychology, but they are the books that my counselling clients have always read. It is the pop psychology that frequently does the heavy lifting of client support between or after contact with helping professionals. I therefore started with an assumption that Brown's work is an effective psychoeducative and bibliotherapeutic intervention that moves readers to help others in their immediate community. From there, I designed 4 research questions on screen to guide my thinking, reading, theorists, and methods. What I want you to know today before analysis is completed is that apart from there being a participant perceived difference between pop psychology and self-help books, this research is an act of political, social, and cultural resistance against the demeriting of psychoeducative books read and used by the masses, particularly the demeriting of Brene Brown books as pop psychology. This is reading to resist the status quo because resistance is useful. It is important to know that reading changes us. Words have change power. We have power. Combine words and us and you have people power to use in creative ways that best suit your situation. Hence, my definition of resistance is from Leger. Creative acts as a response to the hegemony. According to Brown, 2007, creative resistance is useful for achieving change. My literature review supports that just as we all resist differently, everybody reads differently and for different reasons. Some to resist, Some read dangerously, some read to change themselves, some to see themselves in literature, some only read academically, and in that the source becomes important. Some authors over others are seen as more credible voices of individual and social change because that is what hegemony expects. It's also important to know that psychoeducation is a focused psychological strategy used by mental health professionals and doctors, and bibliotherapy, which is using a book to help solve a problem, is a passive form of psychoeducation. My research clearly shows that who recommends the book and an activity associated with the learning in the book is imperative to help a person through a mental well-being challenge during their recovery rather than at point of crisis. A pop psychology book does not replace a therapist or alone turn someone into a lived experienced educator. The book enhances the self-help work an individual has already done on themselves. I chose 3 therapists: Brene Brown, a social work research professor on shame and vulnerability; Antonio Gramsci and his definitions of political and cultural hegemony, organic versus traditional intellectualism, book discussions, and common versus good sense; and thirdly, Dr. Louise Byrne from lived experience, workforce development and training. Clubs evolved because I have facilitated many and have always admired the data that they produce. I also value book clubs as an integration step of bibliotherapy. Book clubs have their own methodology, but I noticed a gap in the literature where book club was never used as a method of data collection, particularly around reading as resistance against a psychiatric model. Focus groups with moderator guides, yes, but never semi-structured book club as the tool of collection. So therefore, my SOC is using online book clubs for data collection and linking Brene Brown as an organic intellectual to the focused psychological strategy of psychoeducation, particularly as bibliotherapy. The data is still being analysed. However, 5 things stand out from my 18 participants across 4 different countries and in 7 online book clubs. What I expected to find hasn't been borne out across the board, but I have corroborated from my illustrative sample that 1. Pop psychology books work well for self-reflective people in recovery. They require a level of insight, good sense versus common sense, and that sense is a distinguisher between pop psychology and self-help books. Also, this is not a topic people have with friends to help educate them. They keep their learnings private. 2. Participants value book clubs as both stimulating and offering connection with others. 3. Who they won't read is coming up in the discussion section, as is 4. The popularity of audiobooks and the interchangeable word reading to also mean listening and watching. 5. Who recommends a book was an efficacious point. If it is someone of personal influence rather than somebody from the hegemony, participants follow the recommendation and read the suggested book to the end. Given another finding is around the sound of an author's voice on digital platforms, I include the voice of some participants. Let's hear direct quotes to tell the story of results chosen because they echo the thoughts of other participants. The first is that a level of insight is necessary for people to take away the message from Brown's work. The next 2 are the value of book club as a healing and personal growth tool.
But I was in such a place that actually lifting a book, I wouldn't have been able to. So for me, books like this, they're great for a recovery journey when you feel stable enough or relaxed enough to actually take in the words on the page.
And I saw the movie, but because you did that in one of your book clubs.
Correct.
And I loved the book club because I saw a whole different take from other people's life experience that I didn't even pick up on.
It's not something that is spoken about. I wonder if it's a taboo subject.
But I was in such a place that actually lifting a book
These next three sound bites sum up that audiobooks and research robust video are considered reading. The participants found Brene Brown either through her TED Talk, that remains one of the top 5 talks of all time, giving her enormous personal persuasion, or through the personal recommendation of a trusted person who has already vetted the source, and finally that the voice and style of Brown reading her audiobook versions juxtaposed to her robust research background positions her as a trusted friend to whom participants will take recommendations from.
Listened to all of it. I've listened to most of it.
Mm-hmm.
And same as last time, it's just fucking gems in everything she says.
Her TED Talk. Yeah,
Ah,
yeah, her TED
okay.
Talk, really put me onto her. I loved it so much. And then I was like, oh, she has another one? Oh, man. And then someone made that cartoon about, do you remember what it is? She's talking about vulnerability, and it's a little short, and it's a clip from one of her TED Talks, and it has like a cow, and they're going down the steps. Do you remember that?
It feels like Brene is a friend. If I don't have the right support network who can understand what I'm going through and say the right things, reading Brene does that for me.
Listen to all of it. I've listened to most of it.
Ah,
Yeah,
It feels like Brene is a friend.
got it. Who participants read is as surprising as who they don't. Participants made a hierarchical decision between pop psychology and self-help books. This supports that participants found value in thinking about the words on the page, pop psychology, versus following a plan of how to interrupt something, self-help. This is a participant explaining a reaction to seeing one of their won't reads in a shop that they frequent. Chat drop who you think from that list they are talking about. All of you. Who would you refuse to read?
Oh, one of those incel people. What's his name? I saw his book in a shop one day. I almost burnt the shop down.
All of you. The analysis is ongoing, but it would seem that personal influence is a major requirement in reading to resist. Therapists and friends may wield the strongest influence, followed by recommendations from others at book clubs. Although print books were valued by most participants, all but one were also audiobook readers as they moved around their day. There was a preference for hearing the voice of the author, but also the voice of the orator was important, and participants decided whether to purchase the audiobook based on the voice. Leja, 22, suggested that more research encompassing the complex nature of creative resistance is required. I aim that this research on resistance through reading becomes a seminal piece of literature added to the body of knowledge. And finally, it was overwhelmingly agreed by participants that unlike self-help books that provide a plan, self-awareness is necessary to take in the messages from Brene Brown's books. So, creative resistance is useful, especially against the silencing of life-changing books like academically derided pop psychology or Bambi and Mary Poppins that originally had a political message to the hegemony. I quote from Kate Thompson's The Wartime Book Club 24. Bambi has much darker beginnings as a novel about persecution and anti-Semitism in 1920s Austria. The Jewish author's book was banned by the Nazis in 1935, who burned it as Jewish propaganda. Just put your hand up if you are now going to have another look at Bambi through the eyes of creative resistance. Mary Poppins also was originally published as an act of resistance against the hegemony of the middle classes. Thank you for participating. I acknowledge CDU and my supervisors, Dr. Kim Cordwell and Dr. Nathan Franklin, my 18 fantastic book club participants, my industry partner, Typeface Books in Perth, and Dr. Greta Galloway, my critical friend.